recording now. So let's see. The task for this week is to make decisions about the encounter editor. And I have I've made some decisions already, and I've actually started programming work on it, and already slapped some stuff together. I actually surprised myself because I was actually able to do some programming. I had thought that my mind had decayed to such a degree that I was no longer capable of writing code. Well, I can write it, and it does so far work, but I know I can't do anything really complicated. The stuff I'm doing, I'm keeping myself to fairly simple stuff. The main things on it are things we've already discussed. However, the biggest change, and this one will be difficult, will be putting a character editor into the system. Right now, you just had to put them into the XML file, and that really isn't that hard, but most people will balk at the idea of having to actually type numbers in. So I'm going to put in an editor. That also means that there will have to be a relationship editor, which is an especially complex thing, but I will work on it. Let's see. But I did get some commentary from Yvonne and Leandro. And in general, you know, it looks like we are in general agreement as to the nature of this thing. For now, well, let me think. I added that. Well, anyway, let me just open up the floor for discussion of the encounter editor and what you would like to see, and so forth. And any thoughts, ideas, comments? What? Oh, wait, there is one issue I do need to discuss. Changing the personality model. I've decided against that. Not because my personality model is that great, but rather because I've experimented with lots of other things, and I just don't see much room for improvement. That is, my personality model isn't that good, but I just, after many years, I just don't see anything any better. It is true that the one flaw in my reasoning is that for certain types of encounters, changing the personality model might be necessary. And I've given this a lot of thought. My fear here is that people will play around too much and screw things up. So my thinking right now is I'm going to stick with the existing model, and at some point down the road, when enough people are screaming and yelling, I want to modify the personality model, and they can come up with good reasons for it based on actual experience, then it won't be that hard to change it. But for now, we're going to keep it, you know, I'm going to cram my system down your throat. So comments, thoughts, ideas?
So what I just haven't fully grasped yet is on the right hand side of the editor, where you have the sliding bars.
Yeah, reactions.
Your reactions. My understanding was that one of those bars would be for one particular trait, say good, bad, but on the editor you have good, bad on the left hand side of the bar. And let's say you can put timid dominant on the right hand side of the bar. I'm not too sure if I grasp that point.
It is not made explicit in the certainly it's not at all explained on the screen. That is meant to be a blend operator. And a blend operator has three parameters: the starting value, the ending value, and the balance factor. And what you do is you specify the starting value and the ending value. It will be bad good or p bad good or false honest or whatever. You specify each of those with the menu, and then you use the slider to adjust the relative weighting of the two. And that will determine the inclination for choosing that particular reaction. That is not explained. I think it's explained somewhere. Let me just make a quick note to myself because I want to discuss something with you. Okay, question about how the editor exports stuff. I guess it exports an XML file or something like that. How is this specific file used on a story world exactly? I have not yet built the runtime system, although I really don't expect the runtime system to be difficult to implement. And there is another feature I will be adding to the runtime engine, and that is the inclusion of an image. That is, the runtime engine will present primarily the text, and beneath it, the options. And somewhere in the text up in a corner, an image. And most of the time, the default value will be the image of the character in question. That is, you can, so if you're talking to Fred, you see a picture of Fred. However, I will also include a capability to specify, to put in a custom image just for that one encounter. So you'll be able to say, all right, use this image with that encounter. Let's see. So really, the runtime engine will be very simple. You see the text, you see your options, you see the image, and after you select an option, it will show you the consequence, the reaction to it, what they do in response to your decision. And then there will be a button that says, all right, go on to the next encounter. Let's see. So the runtime engine will read the XML file. Now, this will all happen on the web. That is one thing I'm quite confident of. It really won't be difficult to put this on the web, but it will have to be written in JavaScript. And there is one killer problem that I don't know how to solve. I have studied it and thrown up my hands. And that is how to save the game if necessary. You can't do that with JavaScript. Right now, my feeling is, well, we'll put it off. You can't save it. You just have to play through the whole thing. Unfortunately, with Le Morte d'Arthur, that will be immensely difficult because Le Morte d'Arthur is a very long story world. Nevertheless, see, there are all sorts of issues when you allow a save game for, using up all your disk space, trolls and such, screwing everything up. So for now, I'm going to leave that unimplemented, but yes, you can use local memory And again, I briefly looked into how that's done, and then threw my hands up and said, oh God, more complexity. That is one thing I've told myself. I am not going to learn any new technology. I've spent 45 years now learning technologies. I have learned more, and I have forgotten more technology than any of you guys have ever learned, because that's what you do in this business. That's what you'll end up doing. You learn something, 5 years later, it's obsolete. You throw it away. You start over with something new. And it just goes on. And every year, there's something new you got to learn, and something old you got to throw out. And it's immensely frustrating. And you guys will have to deal with this thing. And I've reached the point, damn it, I'm 70 years old. I don't have to learn any new technology. I'm too old. It's hard for me to do now. My brain is full or something, and I just can't learn this stuff. So for any new technologies we use, I'm just going to ask somebody to help. Anyway, or having an API call for a JS server to store the game state in there. True story. Yeah, every 5 years. Yep. So anyway, I'm on the other side of that curve. You guys are on the uphill side. And right now, if you're young enough, this is all, oh yeah, I'll learn something new. I learned, God, boy, in the 70s and 80s, I was conversant in Lisp, Fortran, Basic, 6502 assembler, 68,000 assembler, Pascal, Forth, APL. Oh, there were a lot of languages, and I just soaked them all in. It's easy when you're young, but it gets harder. You know, the neurons die, and you don't have as much space. So anyway, even though the size is not that big, I guess it's free or very inexpensive. Yeah, I've got a V. Yeah. So anyway, it's really not so much a cost problem as just a technical problem that is no longer within my grasp. So I will mention one other thing. By the way, this is common in many fields of effort. For example, finance, stock exchange, that kind of thing. You may have noticed that most of the people who actually work on stocks are very young. You don't see 50-year-old people, you know, buying and selling stocks professionally. And that's because in order to do that, you have to memorize, you have to master 1 million details about every company in the industry. It's not good enough to know about, you know, brand X, because brand Y is a competitor. So you got to know everything about brand X and everything about brand Y and Z and everyone in the industry. And you've got to master all these tiny details, and that's a job for young people. The old guys, meanwhile, are way up on the, you know, the 29th floor making grand statements. I think we should expand our diversification of the variability of our system, and, you know, making grand theoretical comments. That's what you do when you get old. So actually, that really is worthwhile. Let's see. By the way, it's not closely related to our subject, but would you say it is easier or more complicated to make games before? I would guess more complicated, but I don't know, since now the tool and technology is sometimes going to make our work hard sometimes. It is very different now. Back in the old days, we had very little to work with, very few tools. Our systems were very slow. There was very little memory. For example, the Atari VCS, codenamed Stella, the first video games machine that was really successful. It had a 6502 running at 1 megahertz. This is an 8-bit processor. It couldn't multiply or divide. It did addition, subtraction, and logical shifting. Those were the only, and OR, and exclusive OR. And those were the only operations it could perform. 1 megahertz is kind of slow compared to current speeds of, 3 gigahertz. It's, you really could see when it was just too damn slow. The machine, initially, your program had to fit into a 2 kilobyte ROM. That's 2K of assembly language. That's very, very tight. Remember, think of it this way. An icon these days will require 50 kilobytes of memory to store all the variations on just an icon. And we had 2K of space for everything, the program, any data, imagery, whatever. And we had 128 bytes of RAM. It was ridiculous, immensely difficult to get anything done. The most common problem, the other thing was the displays. You didn't have buffers. You drew the display in real time. You were drawing onto a cathode ray tube, which, do any of you know what a CRT is? Cathode ray tube. It's the old style television that has an electron beam that's sweeping across, illuminating phosphors. Well, you had a buffer equal to 1 scan line. And so you loaded up 1 scan line, and then you had to lay out the next scan line and store it in the buffer while it was drawing the previous one. And you had exactly 76 machine cycles to do that in. That was approximately 30 instructions. And in 30 instructions, you had to design the next line. And then, while you load that in, and then you do the next line. And it was immensely difficult. And the most common thing you'd be working in your office at Atari, working away on something, and then you'd hear a voice, and down the hall you'd hear somebody saying, "God damn it, 77!" And because if you came in at 77 machine cycles, you got garbage on the screen. So yes, it was immensely difficult then. Nowadays, it's still very difficult in that, one, you have immensely greater specialization. Back then, I did everything. Software design. I did the image design. I did the sound design. I wrote the manual. You did everything. Nowadays, it is, the task is broken down among huge teams, and one person will get the image design for one image in the whole game. You also have magnificent tools, which is really great, because we had no tools at all. We did literally everything by hand. We had graph paper, and we would draw pixels in, and then convert that into binary, and then convert that into hex, and then type that into the program. You guys have all these glorious tools. On the other hand, these glorious tools are immensely complicated, and you have to spend months learning them. So I would not say, is it all in all, is it better now? Is it easier now? I would say it depends on your personality type. If you're a loner like me, you know, creative in a million different ways and so forth, then things nowadays are totally unacceptable. I mean, I just wouldn't work in the industry the way it is right now. I'm a pioneer. I enjoyed being a pioneer. I enjoyed making up everything as I went. And you know, gee, what's a heartbeat sound like? Well, you know, kerflump, kerflump, kerflump. What's that? How do I translate that into bytes? And I spent about a week just thinking about what a heartbeat sounds like and how I get that in data, and then trying it out. No, that's not right. So forth. Well, I don't know how to. I don't know what it's like now, but I certainly wouldn't like it for myself. Let's see. Anyway, we were talking about the encounter editor, weren't we? And what were we talking about it? Changing personality model. Can anybody remind me what I was talking about before I went on that grand digression? Oh yes, storage and learning new stuff. I was digressing on a digression. Okay. Let's see. You actually, I have something workable right now, but I want to do a bit more before I release it. Programmers are always that way. Hold on. Well, you know, I'll have it for you tomorrow. I just want to add one more feature. That's you've done that. You know what it's like. But I will send something out for you in the next few days to look over. I'd really like to get the character editor in there, and I'm hoping that it'll only take me a couple of days. And of course, there will be there will be bugs, flaws, weaknesses, and so forth, but that's what you're for. So let's see, any other ideas? Oh, yes, that's right. The question had been about what Chris had asked about what the sliders on the right meant, and that what that really demonstrates is the lack of any kind of documentation. Now, there is documentation in the form of the 3 videos that I made. Let me just ask, I'm assuming you have all at least watched the videos, or at least once. And so the first question I will ask, or no, I need to phrase this. Well, the general idea I want to ask is, are the videos adequate? And some specific questions related to that are, 1, should I throw those away and start over and do new videos? 2, should I keep those, because they are very nice videos, enormous amount of work went into them. 2, should I just have some supplemental videos? 3, should I make some documentation, textual documentation? 4, do you have any ideas about how better to explain this stuff? Maybe I should just add more tool tips to the thing. Thoughts? How do we document it? Let's see. Textual documentation, supplemental videos.
So I've just opened up, because with the encounter editor that you sent a couple of documents with it. There's like old novel draft, and one is the manual.
Yeah.
And I suppose maybe I may have missed this part, but there is some textual, um, I'm just kind of flicking through it at the moment. There's some textual documentation on that, and I must have just missed it. So there is some textual documents there as part of the manual. Um, I suppose what stumped me was that it's just not intuitive, but not everything is intuitive in life, so it's probably.
The documentation or the software?
So when you sent a zipped file of the encounter editor, inside the zip file there was the software in Java, but there was some other documents in PDF form, and one
Yeah.
was the manual.
Yeah, let me pull that out.
And about halfway down, probably page 10, 11, it starts to talk a bit about the right column. I think I would need to read this myself, which I missed.
Here we go. Yeah, I'm looking at it now. The manual.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't looked at it in. Oh yes, now I remember that. And well, it's 24 pages long. Yeah, but here we are wasting space on all sorts of crap. Yeah, it does go through the stuff at a, at what I'll call the petty level, explaining. Yeah, yeah. Well, it is I'll call it a serviceable manual. One thing it lacks is any concept of, oh gosh, yes. Okay, one thing it lacks is any concept of the overall strategy of designing an encounter system. It just talks about, basically it's saying, here's a calculator, here's what the buttons do, and it doesn't tell you why you would want to actually do any calculations. So yes, I need to expand on that. So let's talk. And I will certainly say it is a lot easier for me to produce textual documentation than video documentation. Those 3 videos, gosh, together they were about 2 months full-time work. So I will start with that manual, but basically I'm going to rewrite the whole thing from scratch. And I think what I have to do is add a prefatory discussion about what an encounter system is, the big picture, how all this stuff is going to fit together, and then get into the details of how you actually do it. Let's see, let me catch up on some of the yeah, maybe I can use the videos as the lead in, and then say, okay, now you can download the encounter editor, and it has documentation, a manual. A tutorial about creating a new and simple project. Yeah, definitely I will have to have in the documentation a sample encounter world with just a few encounters showing how the whole system fits together. And maybe I'll just use the barroom brawl because that's such a simple confrontation. Let's see, maybe implement the text of the documentation directly on the editor. Yeah, question mark button. Yeah, or tooltips, something like that. I tend to be, I don't like that. Tooltips are okay as a quick reminder or just a vague pointer, but normally decent documentation requires that you show pictures of things, and you have, have a big bright circle. This is the thing you do here. And doing those types of animations in code is a lot of work. So I'll see if I can't stick some tooltips in there. But again, I think the manual, will have to be the primary reference source. I think text is still relevant. Most engines don't have videos to explain stuff, just good old text. Really? People are still relying on textual manuals. I'm pleased to hear that. Yeah, tooltips are a Band-Aid solution, and that's why I don't have any now, but I think they have some utility as a quickie reminder, especially when you've got these strange little icons. I did something somewhere where I took the tooltips or the icons used in the Firefox web browser, and I just went through and replaced each of their little icons with an Egyptian hieroglyphic. And then I asked, okay, which of these is easier to figure out? And the answer is neither. And the hieroglyphics are just as informative as their odd little icons. So we've reached the point where icons really don't help very much. The problem is we've made them too tiny. There was a time when they were big enough that they could actually indicate something about what they were about. But now, 3 little horizontal lines, oh God, well, you know that, you've seen all of this. Let's see. What is not clear to me is who we are doing this for. For us, for that one guy out there who will get interactive storytelling and instantly fall in love with this technology, or are trying to get as many people using it as we can and hope that some of them will eventually get it. Very good question. I should have addressed this earlier. Basically, what I'm thinking of is doing with the encounter editor what I planned to do with the Storytron technology starting about 12 years ago. The idea back then was I would build this wonderful technology, show it to the world, and millions of people would say, oh my God, this is glorious, wonderful, I gotta build story worlds with this. And what happened was that a few people looked at it and said, oh my God, this is impossible to understand. And that was the end of that. And I kept trying to make it easier and explain it better and add more user-friendly features and so forth. And it just didn't work because the technology is too complicated. And also this whole idea of process-intensive thinking and the idea of using mathematics to represent dramatic phenomena, that just doesn't fly. I did not realize how difficult that is for most people. In fact, yesterday I had a long conversation with my colleague Laura Mixon, who was in this project from the very beginning in the 90s. And she had made many efforts she's a science fiction novelist. She has several published books and has a great many friends in the science fiction industry. She's a friend with the guy who did Game of Thrones, And anyway, so she was saying that she just couldn't convince any of the other science fiction novelists to think about dramatic phenomena in mathematical terms. They just refused to do it. And that was the killer problem. And that is the problem even today. People still refuse to think about, why would a person lose their temperature or temper in mathematical terms? How do you write an inclination formula for whether they're going to lose their temper? That really isn't that difficult, but people just don't think that way. So that's why I started doing these courses. I thought, well, let me at least try to teach people. And I have learned a lot. This is the third iteration of this course, and I've learned a lot. I mean, you guys have had great difficulty absorbing these ideas about how to use math. So I'm already planning the fourth generation, which will be built around the Encounter editor. I made a huge mistake with you guys going into the Storytron technology. That wasted your time. It's just too messy. So next time I'll skip all of that stuff with the Storytron technology and instead focus exclusively on the Encounter editor. The goal is to get you guys actually to put together a cadre of people, any of you who are interested in helping in critiquing the development of the Encounter editor and then publicizing it. That is telling people, hey, you ought to play with this. This is fun. You don't have to if you decide, you got other things to do, that's fine. But I'm hoping, I actually have about 30 or 40 people from previous things who are part of we have a discussion group that is actually inactive right now, but it's still out there. And I intend to activate that group once the Encounter editor is ready for broader dissemination. Say, all right, everybody, here it is. First, everybody gets to yell at it and suggest changes and so forth. And then when we as a group are happy with it, then we go out to the world and we say, hey, everybody, look at this. So that's the general plan. I don't know. Let me catch up on some questions here. Let's see. I was not thinking about a tooltip system, but literally a button to access the all documentation directly on the engine, so you don't have to store the documentation somewhere. Yes, that's online documentation stuff. The problem with online documentation is ordering it properly. That is, that's a bottom-up kind of documentation instead of a top-down. Top-down says, all right, here's our general strategy. We're going to be trying to do this. And here's the middle level ideas of how you do that. And then here are the details about how you do that. Online documentation starts at the bottom and says, all right, here's this button. And this is what this button does. But it's hard to go up from there to the higher level of, why you're doing this. That's why I prefer textual documentation. Online tends to focus on, on the trees rather than the forest. Let's see, you mean the good old help menu? Yes. Help systems. I've gone through, I've watched the evolution of the idea of help systems. Everybody agrees there's a big problem understanding how to get software working. And the solution we've come up with is the internet. That is basically you go to the user group and you say, hey, I can't figure out how to do this. And somebody explains it to you. That's that was the final resolution that we have settled on, and it's a crappy resolution. For example, wait, what is the blogging software that is really popular? WordStar or
WordPress?
WordPress, yes, thank you. At one point, I tried to convert my website over to WordPress. And it turned out there was a killer problem. I'll take a few minutes to explain this because it's a good example of user interface difficulties. WordPress was designed for little bitty blogs where basically you just sort of slap stuff together and there's no organization. My website has over 1,500 pages organized in an intellectual structure. It's a tree, and things are related to each other and so forth. It's still nowhere near good enough structure, but it is still a structure. And it's huge. And WordPress just wasn't designed for that. And so it turns out if you want to put in a link, if you're writing something and you want to link to another page, well, you just do it with a menu. The problem is the menu lists every single page on the website in alphabetical order. And so if you have 1,500 pages, you have to scroll through a 1,500 entry long menu to find it. Now, what's frustrating about this is that, like from the very beginning of graphical user interfaces with big menus, they came up with this really neat idea where you have a little triangle next to something and you click on it and it points down and shows you all the stuff that's inside. And that's how we have big tree structures. WordPress never figured that out. They did not ever figure out the idea that you can group things and, open things up and close them and so forth. That goes over their head, which is an act of a blunder of cosmic magnitude. And so, but they never did it. And I went into the user group and asked, how do you organize it? How do you deal with this? And basically they said, you can't. Get used to it. Design your website around that. And well, when I complained about that, they basically said, you go to hell, you troll. And so anyway, that's sometimes the internet doesn't work. But yeah, help systems remain a huge problem. And yeah, we'll probably end up using the user group to help people out. The problem really here is that everybody, when you're confused about something, you're confused in your own idiosyncratic way. And the manual doesn't answer the question in your idiosyncratic way. It provides a generalized answer. And that's what user groups are good for. And that's why I try to make this an interactive session where you can ask your own idiosyncratic questions. Let's see. I'm not seeing a huge difference between your XML and the JSON file format. No, XML and JSON are very similar. Not interchangeable, but they're pretty good. Unity and many others have a lot of JSON support. Open source Fungus for Unity would be a great first candidate for implementing the narrative system. Yes, in fact, there are, I believe, some fairly good translators that will convert XML to JSON. It's just that Java likes XML and JavaScript likes JSON. And so we'll just need to, I know I could write something that would automatically output JSON, but I think it's easier to say, all right, developer, you got to do an extra step. My encounter editor puts out XML, then you grab one of the standard converters on the internet and convert it to JSON and then put that, feed that in. Let's see. Oh, yes, fourth iteration, something we could attend as a sequel. In fact, the fourth iteration I'm going to make very public in the sense that first I'm going to completely rewrite that lesson, all those lessons. I'm just going to start all over. The early ones are pretty good. I will retain most of those, but it is going to be a major rewrite. This will take a while, and basically I will have a huge mailing list in which I'll tell everybody, okay, everybody, next week we will be talking about lesson number 5. Everybody's welcome to come to ask questions. And I expect we'll get a lot more people, but we'll also get, and we'll get more questions, but it will be more generalized, or a larger group, whatever. What else? Any other comments, questions, whatever? Have a good idea. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I sent you through the email a possible idea for the encounter editor. It was the visual flow for the encounters. I know it seems a bit messy, but I mean, presenting the list of encounters in a graphical way, like a flow diagram or so. So, well, you could see how the storyboard tree is, more or less, build iterations over that.
I've got a sneaky answer to that. I'm going to ask you, I'm going to need a minute to organize my thoughts on it. And so I will ask you to give everybody, while I'm thinking about it and getting the dog in, would you give everybody a quick summary on what you're doing with the that research project?
Yeah, sure. Okay, guys. Well, about the research project we are all working on. Well, right now I've been stuck with the, well, maybe let me show you, because I'm not as good as talking as Chris. Can you see the link here? Okay, this is just a test example for showing you one list of random selected characters with a central character, and the rest of the characters can be moved. Well, the drag thing is still an issue. I have to polish that. I still have to, make some polishments and fix some issues on that. But well, basically this is just for testing.
This is not as, this doesn't do as much as the other one. The other one, the previous one was actually had more function to it.
Well,
the whole circle and a lot of characters.
Yeah, but if you refresh the page, it will get more characters. I mean, the number of characters selected is randomly based.
Yeah, okay.
So maybe in one version, you're getting only a couple of characters, but if you refresh it, you are getting like 6 or 7 characters. And well, I'm still working on this. I plan to have it as soon as possible. But well, since I told Chris, I got back to work 2 weeks ago, and I simply don't have all the time that I would.
Okay, there is no rush on this. We can do research at any time. I mean, so.
I'm sorry because you asked me to explain, and I didn't explain anything. I just started mumbling.
Well, we'll do it when it's ready. It's not like there's a deadline. What's the final use? This is for a research project idea that we came up with. The idea, it involves something called multidimensional analysis, which is a rather complex statistical technique that allows you, the goal of it is to come up with what is possibly a better personality model. based on actual drama as shown in movies. And the basic idea is for lots and lots of people to compare movie characters and say, how much is Darth Vader like Agent Smith? To what degree is Princess Leia like Trinity? Or for that matter, how much is she like Frodo Baggins? That's the basic concept. And it turns out that if you get enough data of people, of what's called similarity data, and you need a lot, you can actually you do an analysis that will eventually reveal some basic commonalities in the way people perceive characters in a story. And those commonalities then could become the basis for an empirically derived personality model. Anyway, let me now answer your question, Yvonne. Yes, it would be nice to show a graphical representation. I have struggled with this problem with Storytron. It's far more difficult in Storytron and definitely easier in an encounter system. However, it is still very difficult to do because you don't know in advance the degree of bushiness in the display. That is, you'll have the very first encounter, once upon a time, we'll put it up at the top. And then that'll lead to another encounter. And well, yes, that could lead to other encounters. And so it might branch out. You see, this is not at all, the encounter system is not meant to produce a branching tree. It is meant to produce it could be done with just a purely linear system. Once upon a time, this happened, that happened, this happened, this happened, this happened. But in each case, the choices made by the player affect global variables that finally affect the final result. That's the structure of Le Mortateur. There is a little bit of branching to it and a little bit of fold back and so forth. But Le Mortateur is mostly linear, whereas most people think in terms of branching. This will be one of the fundamental design difficulties people have, that they will think in terms of branching trees rather than global variables that are being changed as time goes on. And so, yes, we'll have a problem there. I think presenting it as a diagram encourages the style of branching trees. I think it helps you think more and more in terms of branching trees, and I think that's ultimately counterproductive. It leads people to think in the wrong ways. By the way, in the Wednesday class, I believe it was the Wednesday class, somebody had suggested that I look at a system development environment language, a markup language called INC, associated with a project called Inkle. Have any of you guys seen INC? And
I think that was Max that suggested that last week.
Okay.
Last Sunday.
Well, I had looked at it about a year ago and rejected it, and but I went back and looked at it again. INC is sort of like a 7th generation text adventure system. It is basically classic text adventure structure, moving from event to event, in a mixed system of trees and fold back and so forth. But its whole structure is definitely text adventure. Now, they do have a mathematical capability in it, and decision-making based on mathematical values. But and so theoretically, their system could do everything that my encounter editor system can do. However, it is not inclined in that direction. I mean, theoretically, you could do everything that my encounter system does in machine language. It's just, it'd be a lot harder. This is an important point to understand about software. Tools, my adage, boiling it down to a slogan, the tool shapes the hand of the user. Another way, some people say this as, when you got a big enough hammer, everything starts to look like a nail. That is, the tool encourages you to think about a problem in a particular way. Here's another way of saying it. Freeways encourage you to go where the freeway goes, not where you want to go. And well, okay, so you can take the freeway, but then you get off the freeway and get on a road, and you know, may get closer and closer. But I would argue the whole point is to first figure out, where do I want to go, and then figure out how you get there. But most people don't think that way. And so again, with the tools, ink is a tool that encourages you to think in terms of a text adventure and in terms of branching based on options chosen. Whereas the encounter editor encourages you to think in terms of changes in relationships. That's the whole point of it. The actions you take change the way people feel about you. And so that doesn't, I'm not saying that Inkle doesn't work or can't do what the encounter system does. It's just that every tool pushes you to think in a particular way. And I find that Inkle pushes, in my opinion, pushes in the wrong direction. So let me catch up here. How do we handle characters we're not familiar with? Is there an area we can drag those to ignore? Oh, you're referring to, Scott, are you referring to Yvonne's system?
Yeah, that got answered farther down, so.
Okay, I get it. Okay, we can select, okay, yeah. Still working with us reviews, I'll keep you posted. Okay, okay, so. Any last questions? Okay, I will be sending you another version of the, an improved version of the encounter editor system in the next few days.
I've one last question.
Sure.
It's not related to what we're talking today, but maybe it's more about art in general. So recently I watched like a 4-hour movie rendition of Hamlet, and it was really, really dramatic, kind of the drama you're talking about. Then not too long ago, I went down to the Vancouver Public Library, or not library, art gallery, and I went in, and there was, you know, it showed Vancouver from the 50s and 60s to present day, post World War Vancouver, and there was, you know, displays of chairs and tables and static objects. And I just couldn't grasp why that would be art. I could grasp why Hamlet could be art, but I couldn't grasp, you know, why static objects would be art in an art gallery, and like, where's the link there? And that's why I thought maybe I'd like to ask your opinion on what you thought about that.
Yeah, a lot of people, a lot of art cannot be understood or is too difficult to understand because all art exists in a context. For example, did I tell you the part about people had difficulty understanding the first scene of Raiders of the Lost Ark? Did I tell you that thing about that scene with the whip? Okay, this is important. Let's see. My parents' generation grew up in the 30s, and the only way they saw video was on the Saturday morning kids shows at the theaters. So you'd pay 5 cents, you go in, and there'd be 3 hours of cartoons and just mixed video. And that was the only way you saw video. There was no TV then. My generation, I was raised on television. That is, television was just available when I was a kid, and parents loved it because you bought a TV and you plunked the kids down in front of it, and the TV took care of the kids while you did other things. And so I watched lots of TV, also Mickey Mouse Club and all sorts of, they were really bad programs, but I mean, we've learned a lot. We have bigger budgets nowadays. Anyway, so my generation watched literally thousands of hours of video. Now, suppose that in your entire life, you've read only 3 novels. You're not going to understand novels very well because you're not very literate. My parents were not video literate because they hadn't seen much video. My generation was video literate. Your generation is even more video literate because video or cinema has evolved with time. Indeed, here's an example from way back in the early 1900s when, what's his name? The guy who made all sorts of wonderful innovations. He did, God, my memory sucks. Anyway, he did a bunch of, he was a director, and he invented the facial close-up. Until then, all movies showed whole bodies. You know, the camera was 20 feet away from the actors and the actors moved around. And then all of a sudden, this guy comes along and does a facial close-up. Why? Because you can see the emotions much more readily in a facial close-up. And that was artistically good. The only problem is, when audiences first saw it, some people said, "Oh my God, it's a decapitated head!" Because they'd never seen that before. They had never in their lives seen a person moving and talking, but it was only their head. So it took a while for people to get used to that. And a lot of artists in cinema developed it. And a particular beautiful example of this came in the opening scene of Raiders of the Lost Ark. Have all of you seen that movie? It is a classic and you really should see it. And in the opening scene, you haven't really seen Indiana Jones yet. You just see these people walking through the jungle. And you're seeing him from behind and in shadow and so forth. And he comes to a creek and there's a little waterfall and he pulls out the tattered fragments of a map and he holds them up and he looks around and he sort of nods his head. Yeah, this is the place. And meanwhile, bad guy sneaks up behind him, and pulls out his pistol and he aims it at Indiana Jones and he cocks the trigger and history takes place, movie history, because the next thing you see is Indiana Jones sort of tilting his head as if I heard something. And then in 3.5 seconds, there are 7 different shots, average length, half a second long, showing in effect that Indiana Jones whirls around, pulls out his whip, knocks the pistol out of the guy's hands with his whip. And the pistol falls into the creek and goes off accidentally. And then the music goes dum, 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 dum. And Indiana Jones walks into the frame looking very tough. I urge you to watch that again, so, freeze framing as you go, because there really are 7 shots, and at least one of them you're not even aware of. Most people, if you show it to them and say, what happened? Tell me the shots. They will mention 5. The good ones will mention 6, but nobody ever sees the 7th. It happens so fast that you don't see it, but you know that it's happening. It's a reaction shot. It's beautiful the way they show the hand grabbing the whip. Everybody sees that. And then they show the hand over his head, just the hand with the whip handle sweeping backwards, okay? Then the next shot is the one nobody ever sees, and that's the hand is sweeping down, and in the background is another guy. And the other guy is watching the target, and he goes, "Oh," and you know, gee, that must have hurt. That happens so fast nobody notices it. But then the audience assembles that in their head to figure out, oh, he pulled out his whip and hit him with the whip. My generation understood that. My parents' generation said, what was that? What happened? What's going on here? They couldn't assemble it. Now, the point here is that art is presented to an audience, and it assumes things about what the audience can and cannot understand. And so, for example, the Jane Austen novels have very long sentence structures, very complex English grammar, because they were written for an audience that had read a lot. And so a modern day reader has to kind of struggle through the Jane Austen novels because most of us don't read that much. You guys, video nowadays moves very quickly. I mean, the shots are short and fast. They, you know, the action just keeps coming at you very quickly. I suggest you watch on YouTube, see if you can find some old episodes of The Twilight Zone. It was a great TV show in the 60s, but you will find yourself saying, oh, come on, can we please, you know, get moving here? Because the shots can last several minutes. You know, and they're just showing one guy saying, oh gosh, gee, talking, and you know, it seems very boring, very lazy, very slow. That's the way video has changed, because the art has changed as the audience has changed. Now, finally, to answer your question, Chris, that art you saw about Vancouver, that was produced for an audience of people who go to these shows all the time and have seen hundreds of these things, and you know, they know all the little symbolic relationships and all that stuff. And if you're not part of that, it makes no sense to you. Painting did that. Painting right up until the beginning of the 20th century was very obvious. I mean, anybody could understand it because most people hadn't seen much painting. But by the start of the 20th century, there was so much painting that they started going off into the wild blue yonder. And we got all these, you know, Cubism and, you know, Picasso and all this stuff. Paintings that only made sense to people who had seen thousands of paintings. Anyway, and that is, in fact, a problem with games now. If you took a person who had never seen a game before and plunked them down in front of the latest, greatest game, they would say, what the hell am I supposed to do? And they would be totally confused, because games these days are designed for people who have been playing games for years. And that's not bad. It's not good. It's just, it's the way things are. However, I will mention one other thing here. The games industry is in constant renewal because it's always losing audience. That is, as people grow up, they get tired of it and they leave. And there are always young people coming in to replace them. And so the games aren't able to build as much as, say, cinema. So especially with YouTube now, we're seeing all sorts of interesting experimentation. So cinema is continuing to evolve. Games are also evolving, primarily because of hardware, but also because we are seeing a little bit of generational continuity. But they cannot evolve as rapidly as cinema evolves because they keep losing their audience. So, oh yeah, the D.W. Griffith, thank you. Yeah, Birth of a Nation. D.W. Griffith, again, I strongly urge you to read, you know, some sort of history of cinema. Finding a good one. God, 30 years ago, the book I read was called The Liveliest Art. And it's ancient, but, and probably obsolete now, but it was at least clear and simple and really demonstrated how that art form evolved. But it stopped. It didn't include Spielberg or Lucas. It didn't have any of that stuff. So it's quite obsolete. But if you can find a good history of cinema that comes up to the current day, you know, bring it to next week's meeting, show it off to everybody. Yes, Eisenstein, yeah, Eisenstein and Griffith, yeah, Eisenstein, it's still, the Cossacks marching down the steps at Odessa is still breathtaking in the way the editing is done. This is a movie that's, what, 80, nearly 100 years old now. And yet the way he filmed that with those boots, bang, 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 just very impressive work. Anyway, okay, well, I'm way over time. So, oh, any last questions though?
Thanks for answering that, because that puzzled me a little bit, or at least giving me your view on that, because that did puzzle me.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Don't ever accept an artist's definition of what art is. It's based on his own experience. It's unique to each individual, and it's based on what you've already experienced. So, okay, then I'll see you guys next week.
Thanks, Chris.
Okay.
Thank you,
bye-bye.
Chris. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.